Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories Podcast. My name is Tim Hannon.
And I'm Steve Wirt.
And on this episode, we decided to do something a little different. We're gonna channel one of our favorite movies, Back to the Future Part 2. And we're gonna look at some alternate timelines. So if you've never seen Back to the Future 2, first of all, what's wrong with you? And if you have never seen it, the premise of the movie is that one of the characters goes back in time, he alters an event in the past, and then it creates an alternate 1985 for the two main characters. Like they're transported into this alternate reality where everything's different from what it was. And so we thought we'd apply that to Pittsburgh sports. We take some significant moments in Pittsburgh sports and then sort of say, okay, here's what happened in the original timeline, and then sort of present a creative, sort of speculative, what would have happened differently had things gone differently. So again, a little different, and it's gonna be us certainly. Speculating a lot in this episode on things that could have happened, but we thought it'd be fun to go back and do. So Steve's going to take the first one here.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the first one, and I guess these things could be big or bad, good or bad, considering your perspective. Because
right,
the same thing happens to Marty in the first one. Like he does change the future, but it's all positive. So like. I mean, it's bad for Biff, I guess, but his Biff's now auto detailing instead of wrecking his dad's car, and now they all have a nice house, and he's a writer.
You're right, but in the second one, it's bad for Marty. So you're right; these are the same thing. It could have turned out better for the Pittsburgh.
Well, you'll
sports
see
team
with the
or
first
worse.
one. Yeah, so we'll dive into the first one. So, first one we call Ben misses the tackle. The original timeline is that Ben Roethlisberger tackles Nick Harper in the 2005 AFC Divisional Championship game against the Colts. And the Steelers win the game and the Super Bowl that year. We covered just that game in a podcast that's just dropped or soon to be dropped. And so now in the alternative timeline, let's go back. Ben misses the tackle. Nick Harper decides to stay to the right, and Ben can't catch him, and he dances his way, celebrates with like the little 1 and 2 guys that were in the corner. They're having fun, and confetti's all over the field. It's a great moment. It's like, the NFL films, the all-time greatest moments in Colts history, they were down to, in my best John Facenda voice, down with 3 timeouts and after a sack on Peyton Manning. Nick Harper didn't give up. But anywho, so what happens is after the Colts win the game, Jerome Bettis, who almost retired the year before, decides that the bus stops in Indianapolis, and he retires after the game. Unfortunately, Bettis joins other all-time sport figures in infamy, just not locally, like Stan Belinda, who gave up the hit, Tim McKyer, who got burned, Fred Snodgrass, who nobody will remember. He dropped like a fly ball in like the 1920-something World Series. Bill Buckner, the guy who missed the ball for the Red Sox at first base. Ernest Biner, the fumble. Ernest Biner was another guy who fumbled that cost Cleveland the game. And, of course, poor Scott Norwood. Scott Norwood just missed a field goal, but it did cost the Bills a Super Bowl. So what else happens besides just poor Jerome Bettis? Because of that, Jerome Bettis doesn't get to open his restaurant because who wants to eat at a restaurant of a loser who all he can do is fumble when the game's on the line? He doesn't get a local or national TV shows. And even with him finishing with 13,000 career rushing yards in the NFL, he doesn't make the Hall of Fame because all anyone can ever remember is that fumble. So he's like still like top 10 in rushing and finished his career that had this great career. It's just like I mean maybe that one's debatable that he gets in the Hall of Fame, but I would say it would have taken him a lot longer, if ever, to get in.
Yeah, I agree.
The play unfortunately goes down in Pittsburgh infamy. For the Pittsburgh perspective, it joins the Sid Slid '94 game, the Sid Slid game, the '94 AFC Championship game, the Pens losing to the Islanders in Game 7 in '92 and '93. The Colts do survive. It's great for the Colts. They survive and they advance. I think they beat Denver at home and they beat Seattle, and Seattle can cry about the officials to the Colts. I have the Colts repeating the following year because that's what they ended up doing, was they end up winning the next year. So they go back to back and they win Super Bowl 41 in the rain over the Bears and that amazing quarterback Rex Grossman. Peyton Manning retires with 3 Super Bowl rings. Tony Dungy also finished his career with 2 Super Bowl wins. Bill Cowher maybe hangs on for one more year after that and decides that he's sick of getting his gas at night, so he retires after a disappointing season. His wife also is ill, so maybe he's just there's some personal stuff going on. It's kind of sad. It's kind of really sad for poor Bill there, and he's obviously not on the CBS show or anything. Maybe I don't know. Cowher never wins a Super Bowl. He goes down in history like Bud Grant or Marv Levy or even his mentor Marty Schottenheimer. The really good coaches that just never could bring home the big one. Even with all his success and great wins, he's another guy who just never, because he never wins that Super Bowl, he never makes the NFL Hall of Fame, I don't think. Mike Tomlin, they still hire Mike Tomlin after that next season. And Mike Tomlin does take the Steelers to Super Bowl 43, and they still win on the San Antonio catch, and that's the one for the thumb. So it's not complete. I didn't completely go outlandish. I kind of tried to harmonize it with like stuff that still happened,
Yes.
So the timelines still kind of merge, because I'm not like thinking it's totally just going to go one way. Unfortunately, the ripple effect is that the Patriots have the most Super Bowl wins of all time, 6. Hello, yeah, you don't have that bragging right over them anymore now. The Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have the most Super Bowl wins. Well, they do anyway, but the 6, no doubt, can't even debate it. And this is all due to Ben not making the tackle.
All due to Nick Harper turning right instead of left.
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Really.
I like it.
Yeah. So that one's kind of depressing in a lot of different ways, not the least of which is now the Patriots have 6 Super Bowl wins.
Yes. All right. Well, that's a good start. I'm going to go with another. I'm going to go hockey with my first one. And this one's called Uwe Krupp's shot is blocked. So here's what happened in the original timeline. In the 89-90 season, the Penguins are battling for a playoff spot. Mario was having a really good year that year, Mario Lemieux. He had actually put together this record scoring streak where he scored in like 50 straight games, but he hurt his back and misses almost 2 months of the season. The Pens are still in contention for a playoff spot all the way down to the last game of the season versus Buffalo. And to get into the playoffs, they don't need to beat Buffalo. They just need to at least tie Buffalo. So back then, they didn't have the shootouts. If you played 5 minutes overtime and the game ended, it just ended in a tie. As an added boost for this game, Mario actually returns his first game in months. He's still very hobbled, but he is still effective. He actually scores a goal and has an assist. And, of course, the game does go into overtime. And literally all the Pens need to do to get to the playoffs is to skate around for 5 minutes and at least force a tie. I mean, if they score a goal and win, that gets them in also. But at the very least, just don't let them score. Well, Uwe Krupp is a defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres. He only had 2 goals the whole season. He scores on a 60-foot slap shot from the blue line. I mean, he was shooting it from outer space, and he scores. And Uwe Krupp had a knack for scoring dramatic goals. Years later, he actually scored the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Colorado Avalanche in an overtime game against the Florida Panthers. So the Pens lose, and the final playoff spot in the Patrick division goes to the Islanders, not the Penguins. So they missed the playoffs on that goal. And at the time, it's seen as like this absolutely disastrous moment for the Penguins, who had many disastrous moments up to this point in their franchise history. But looking back on it years later, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because the Penguins, as a result of not making the playoffs, now possess the number 5 overall pick in the 1990 draft. and they used it to select a Czech winger named Jaromír Jágr. Jágr helps lead the Penguins to the next 2 Stanley Cups and becomes one of the greatest and most enigmatic players in team history. So that's what happened in the original timeline. So let's go with the alternate timeline where Krupp's shot is blocked. He does not get that puck in, and the Penguins hang on for a tie, and they advance to the postseason. So in that timeline, Mario is still clearly hampered by the back injury. So the Penguins make it to the playoffs, but they bow out pretty early. I mean, without a healthy Mario, they didn't really have that good of a team otherwise. So now they're eliminated from the playoffs, and they no longer possess that number 5 draft pick. So they miss out on drafting Jaromír Jágr. So the next year, they make it to the playoffs, and in the first round of the playoffs, they face the New Jersey Devils. In the original timeline of that 91 season, the Devils won 3 of the first 5 games of that series. One of the games that the Penguins won was Game 2, which was won in overtime on a goal by Jaromír Jágr. So without Jágr there to score the overtime goal, the Devils win Game 2. They take the series in 5 games. The 91 Penguins are eliminated in the first round. And it's devastating. The Penguins put together some decent playoff runs after that, but they never do win a Stanley Cup. Mario retires without a championship. And in 1999, when Jágr scores the quote-unquote franchise-saving goal against the Devils, we did a whole episode about that. He's not there to score that goal either. The team in total bankruptcy and ruin, without the money that they would have had from winning the Cups and the popularity from that. They're bankrupt, they're taken over by the league, and they're moved to Kansas City. And years later, Steve and I do a podcast episode on Pittsburgh sports memories, reflecting on the time when Pittsburgh had a pro hockey team.
Wow, that's kind of that's a rough
You
one.
thought yours was a downer.
Yeah. This one almost had like a "It's a Wonderful Life" feel. Yeah,
That's what I was thinking when I was writing that.
Yeah,
It's like you weren't there to pull him out of the ice.
Yeah.
All the men on that transport died because Harry Bailey wasn't there to save them because you
Harry
weren't there to
Bailey
save
is a
Harry.
war hero. My best Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, it is. I mean, mine kind of had a ripple effect too, but there are a lot of weird ripple effects when you start kind of unpacking these.
Well,
and it's hard to predict. I mean, we obviously had fun with it, so I mean, like I
Sure.
said, you can get as ridiculous as you want
Sure,
with this.
sure.
And predicting the future is like, who can? But
But I mean, without
Yeah.
Jágr, the Penguins. I mean, that's. I don't think that's too.
maybe somebody
far-fetched.
else comes along. Maybe like Jágr too. Like that's why Jágr fell to 5th. Like everybody knew he was the best player, but nobody thought he would come from the Czech Republic for some reason.
Yeah. So-
Because and it was still like, well, 90. When did the wall?
It was- it was
the wall?
89.
The wall was down in 89.
89. So it
but
was-
I think the Russian republics were still. But the Czech hadn't. I think it was still Czechoslovakia.
Things were still dodgy.
Yeah,
Let's say
like
that.
Czechoslovakia was still Czechoslovakia. Like Czechs and Slovak hadn't said, you keep Jágr, we'll take Hossa and call it a day.
Yeah, you don't
That's
know
how I
what-
remember my Czechs and my Slovaks. Is there,
You don't know
hockey
what
players.
you don't know what would have happened, but definitely the Penguins would not have had a high draft pick, and all it would have taken would have been somebody to say, "Hey, we'll draft them," and the Penguins would have been stuck with who
Yeah.
knows who. And Jágr
It might have
was-
been, yeah. Jágr is one of the most pivotal picks, definitely in team history
and that's
outside
all.
of Lemieux.
And that's all because Uwe Krupp for the Sabres blasted a shot from 60 feet away.
And Lemieux, like without the Stanley Cups, wouldn't have had the clout to like buy the
That's what I'm
Penguins or
saying.
save the team. So yeah, it's a good one. Harry Bailey's a war hero. The next one is a great what if, and I've thought this a million times. Dan Marino is drafted by the Steelers. Chuck Noll and Art Rooney Jr., who is Dan Rooney's younger brother who ran the scouting, the original timeline goes they draft Gabe Rivera instead of Dan Marino. In his book, which I read, his logic was well, we built with the defensive line the first time. That's how we're going to do it. And Dan Rooney actually came up with a plan to get Dan Marino, but was laughed out of the room by his younger brother and Chuck Noll. Gabe Rivera unfortunately got in a car accident and became paralyzed and never, senior sack, never got any sacks in the NFL. The Steelers slid into mediocrity through the 80s, and they really don't draft another franchise quarterback until 2004 with Ben Roethlisberger. So they kind of go from Terry Bradshaw to Ben Roethlisberger, with really the only quarterbacks of any note were Neil O'Donnell and Cordell Stewart.
Right.
So the alternate timeline is Dan Rooney somehow walks in. He doesn't tell that it's John Clayton's idea. He just pitches it his own. So Chuck Noll and his younger brother take him seriously, and they're like, hey, you know what? That's not a bad idea. We're going to pass on a defensive line. We're going to take that quarterback. They don't come around that often. I know there's like 4 this year, but I got a feeling, if we don't take one, we're not going to have one for a while. So the Steelers, when they draft Dan Marino, they remain in win now Super Bowl mode. And in 1984, when they have to play Miami, now the roles are reversed. And Don Shula has to have David Woodley or whoever he had at quarterback instead of Marino. And the Marino smokes them in the championship game. They go on. The Steelers, I have them beating Miami and San Francisco in the Super Bowl. San Francisco was really good that year, but Miami was competitive in that Super Bowl.
And Pittsburgh had beaten San Francisco. Lost one game in 1984. Who was it against?
It was against us.
It was against the Steelers.
So, yeah.
There you go.
So now, So okay, there's one for the thumb there. We got our one for the thumb. Chuck Noll gets, I'm going to guess, at least 2 more Super Bowl wins. He still retires in 1991 with 6 Super Bowls. Take that, Bill Belichick. And Don Shula, he has the all-time win record. Ha ha. So Dan Marino, it does even better. He gets 4 Super Bowl rings total. Because I'm saying like that 89 team that started off so badly that Noll had to turn around. If he has Dan Marino instead of Bubby Brister, like they probably win a Super Bowl. They probably pull out like an improbable, they probably pull on an improbable Super Bowl win somewhere else along the way.
I can see it.
Yeah, Marino gets Bill Cowher as coach, and Marino doesn't throw interceptions to people covering grass. so hey, they win Super Bowl 30, and Dan Marino decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to outplay John Elway in the AFC Championship game in '97. He doesn't throw interceptions to the middle linebackers named Romanowski or whoever he did. So the Steelers win that Super Bowl too over Green Bay. Marino goes out like John Elway style, this one's for Dan. He retires in 1999 with 4 Super Bowl rings. Now here's the the weird downside of that is John Elway retires without a Super Bowl ring. So this one isn't for John. And the 49ers only have 3 Super Bowl titles. So, without, it's kind of like the Harry Baylor, Dan Marino is a Super Bowl winning quarterback and John Elway isn't. So, and the 49ers only have 3 Super Bowl wins and, there you go.
Wow. I like that one.
Yeah, I figured it can't be all downers, right? Some gotta work out in your favor eventually.
Good one. I like it. All right, I'm going to go with another one that would have worked out potentially better. And this one, I'm definitely getting into the highly speculative territory here. This one is called Joe Flacco Keeps the Drive Alive. So in the original timeline, Pitt's hosting Nebraska. This is September 18th, 2004, a game at Heinz Field, Pitt versus Nebraska. The starting quarterback for Pitt is Tyler Palko, and he's having an awful game. He throws 3 interceptions, and he's actually booed by the home fans. So the head coach of Pitt's Walt Harris, and he sends a redshirt freshman into the game by the name of Joe Flacco. This is late in the 3rd quarter because they're down by a lot. What does he have to lose? He puts Joe Flacco into the game. Flacco does scramble for 1 first down, but then his only other pass attempt, he's sacked. And that leads to a 3rd and long, and Harris, like typical Walt Harris calls for a quick kick on 3rd and long, and Flacco shanks the punt because he's not a punter. And so then that's the end of Joe Flacco. He brings Palko back into the game, and Palko actually recovers. He actually almost leads Pitt back from a 14-point deficit. The Pitt still loses, but Palko becomes entrenched as a starter for the remainder of the season. Actually leads Pitt to the Fiesta Bowl that year. Pretty good season for Pitt in 2004. We covered that in another episode. Flacco, he realizes, hey, I have no future here. Palco's the starter, so he transfers to Delaware, and he establishes himself there, and he leads to him being selected number 18 overall by the Ravens in 2008. Flacco becomes a central figure in the Steelers-Ravens rivalry, and he ultimately leads the Ravens to a Super Bowl victory in Super Bowl 47 and is named as that game's MVP. So things worked out pretty well for Joe Flacco, I would say, after that.
Yeah.
But let's imagine that instead of getting sacked on second down, Flacco escapes the pressure and finds Greg Lee, the wide receiver, for a first down.
Greg Lee made a catch. Wow, impressive.
Greg Lee had a good season that year. That was before he had the bad season, and then.
Well, no, then he decided he wanted to go pro, which is one of the most curious decisions. Like, you're the most mediocre college player.
Yes.
Whoever's telling you this is giving you bad advice.
That was unfortunate. We'll cover that at a different time.
Like people that made really bad decisions.
He got hoodwinked by an agent. It was sad. Anyway, in this case, Greg Lee catches the pass for a first down. So Flacco's still on the field, and he marches the team down the field, scores a touchdown, gets the ball back, scores another touchdown to complete the comeback against Nebraska. And so now, in this timeline, Walt Harris is left with no choice but to continue to start Flacco. And Flacco continues to stack wins, leads Pitt to a Big East title and a victory this time over Urban Meyer in Utah in the Fiesta Bowl.
Joe Flacco beats Alex Smith, huh? Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. Harris is retained as head coach. In the original timeline, remember, Harris did not last after the season, but because of all the success with Flacco, he's retained as head coach. And together, Harris and Flacco, along with other stars like Darrelle Revis and Shady McCoy, build Pitt into a powerhouse, leading to an undefeated season in 2007. So Flacco's really now, instead of being at the University of Delaware and being like a potentially a good pro quarterback, Flacco's playing Division I football for a team that's really on the rise. And instead of being drafted number 18 by the Ravens in the 2008 draft, Flacco's drafted number 3 overall by the Atlanta Falcons, who had instead that year, in the original timeline, had used that pick to draft Matt Ryan. The Falcons, with Joe Flacco as quarterback, blow out the Patriots in Super Bowl 51 and do not blow the lead. Flacco's named MVP, and after that game, Tom Brady's so heartbroken that he retires.
Nice. I like that Tom Brady's retiring.
I had to throw that in there for all the Brady haters.
Yeah.
If Flacco just completes that pass on second down, Tom Brady's not playing anymore. I think it's a logical conclusion.
Makes sense. Boy, there's quite the ripple effect on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure that like Walt Harris can recruit LaShawn McCoy because that was a one-stat recruit, but hey, you never know.
He was a local kid though.
And I mean, Flacco was never going to start at quarterback because his name isn't Palco, and his dad Bob doesn't coach West Allegheny.
Well, that's why Flacco had to win the game against Nebraska.
It wouldn't have mattered. I don't think it would have mattered. I
think the pressure would have been high enough because Palco had only started 2 games at that point in his career.
Yeah.
So I mean, if Flacco's the hot hand, I think it might have happened.
Well, be that as it may, and Tom Brady is now retired with only 3 or 4 Super Bowls. So.
You're right.
So we're going to go with, this is another kind of sad one. The Immaculate Reception is ruled illegal touching. In the original timeline, we're in the Immaculate Reception, the ball, 4th and 10, the ball bounces off either Frenchie Fuqua or Jack Tatum, depending on who you talk to. The ball is caught out of the air by Franco, riding his white horse, and that's my best Jack Fleming impersonation. Jack Fleming would describe it. This kind of starts the Steelers dynasty of the 1970s. They did lose to the undefeated Miami Dolphins that year. But hopefully one of these years some team will put a nice little asterisk on there to say, hey, we also went undefeated. Yeah. But this starts the Steelers dynasty of 1970s in a run of 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. It really transforms the team from perennial loser into model NFL franchise, and we've kind of covered that in Steelers Dark Ages and such stuff. So Fred Swearinger rules that Frenchie Fuqua touched the ball, making the play illegal.
This is the alternate time.
Yeah,
right?
so now we're into alternate universe land. So he goes to the telephone calls and says, yes, we have the National Guard waiting outside. You're fine. And he's like, okay, cool. So he's like, yep. He touched it. They can't do that. It's not a touchdown.
And that was the rule at the time. If the offensive player touched it,
You couldn't have two touch it in
Right.
concession, I guess, or consecutively. Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
That's the
so
word.
you're saying he's rolling it an incomplete
Complete
pass.
pass, yes,
Okay.
or illegal, whatever the penalty would
Yeah,
have
yeah.
been. Plays over. Steelers lose. The Raiders celebrate. The Raiders lose in the AFC Championship to the 72 Dolphins anyway. John Madden and Phil Villapiano brag about this game until this day. Riots ensue in Three River Stadium, but it's quickly subdued as the game was blacked out locally and nobody else knew the game was going on. So, so whenever you meet somebody that says they were sure of the game, they were like part of the million people that said they were there that really weren't. And it's SOS, like, which the polite way of saying is same old Steelers, but really, people would say same old poop with. And the Steelers never really recover. It's like the Steelers have always been. It's like even when they get a good team, it seems like an unfortunate break goes against them. This really sets the team back. No super Steelers of the 1970s. They don't really win a Super Bowl game. They kind of like the San Diego Chargers or one of those teams, just an also-ran. Unfortunately, Art Rooney Sr., the Chief, never gets his Super Bowl win. Neither does Chuck Noll. Rocky Bleier has reminiscing games about this years later with him and Villapiano and Madden, where Rocky Bleier plays the role of Villapiano, whining and crying about, Frenchie really touched it, so the roles are totally reversed, which is just hilarious to think, watch Rocky Bleier complain about that. But the NFL in general is missing a great play in its history. And it takes the NFL doesn't really reach its NFL really took off in the 70s because of that Steelers-Dallas rivalry. So they really don't have an iconic play until the Dwight Clark catch in the '81 championship game. So that's kind of that's San Francisco beating Dallas. So that's a big rivalry game too. So the Steelers finally win their first Super Bowl in 2005 in Super Bowl 40. Bill Cowher finally brings the first championship home after, what would that be, 1933 to 2005. Yipes, that's 70 something.
years.
Yeah, you were entering Arizona Cardinal territory here. So, the Steelers, another fallout from this, the Steelers have 10 less Hall of Fame inductees. Yeah, they
Wow.
don't have their own wing of the Hall of Fame, maybe I don't know. I'm sure somebody still would have made it from Mean Joe Green probably still makes it or something like that, but definitely not the tertiary players like Ham or Lambert or definitely not the receivers. Maybe Stallworth. Stallworth was pretty good. I don't know. So that's kind of a downer, but at least the Steelers got their one Super Bowl in Super Bowl 40.
So you're going with that, that play literally launched the dynasty?
Yeah, even though I know they lost, I guess I went kind of really dark on that. I mean, maybe they lose that game and they still recover and they win one or two Super Bowls
Well,
in the 70s.
I think like you said though, there's a lot to be said about the mentality and the culture. Like you said, it was literally 40 years of everything going against them, and that kind of turned all the mentality around. Good things can happen.
Yeah.
So
it took Noel 369 to 72 to build that team.
Right.
That's how bad they were. It took him 3. I mean, I realize free agency wasn't what it was back then. There was none. So you really had to. It took them 3 draft class to even build to making the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they still win a Super Bowl. I mean.
Yeah, but that's interesting though, because again,
I just think it's funny
springboarded
the
them.
role reversal too. Now Rocky Bleier's complaining, in NFL films,
Yeah.
But no, in the NFL at whole too would have been hurt too, because they wouldn't have had those Steelers Cowboys Super Bowls in the 70s, and it really would have been until the San Francisco teams. Well, maybe I didn't put that in there. Maybe Dallas wins another Super Bowl.
That's a good point.
Without the Steelers in there, maybe Dallas now has 4
That's
Super
the team of
Bowls.
the 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So,
Yeah, that would have had a lot of repercussions.
yeah.
Well, thank goodness it was called the way it was.
I like the riot being subdued easily.
Yeah, I like that too. I thought you were going to go somewhere different with that, like the stadium burned down or something.
Well, they started a small fire, but there was only 30,000 people there. So
Okay, so I'm going with, for my next one, I'm going with Joe Montana never gets hurt in the 1990 NFC Championship game. And you may be saying, well, Tim, what does that have to do with Pittsburgh sports? And I will get there. Just give me a second. So, 1990, the San Francisco 49ers just won the last 2 Super Bowls, and they're dominant. I mean, I don't know, Steve, if you remember. Like, I think it's hard if you weren't around then to remember, like, how good the 49ers were.
I remember the
in that era.
55 to, like, what was that, 7 or?
Yeah, against Denver the year
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Well, and in 1990, Montana was the league MVP that year. So, like, they were still rolling. Like, they were going to win a 3rd straight
And they
Super
had
Bowl.
Steve Young as their backup. I
They
think.
did, and he'll factor into
Yeah.
this one. So, I mean, they're going to win another Super Bowl. Like, it's just a given almost at this point. Montana's in his absolute prime. Like I said, he's the league MVP that year. Well, they find themselves in a defensive slugfest in the NFC Championship game at home against the New York Giants. And Leonard Marshall, in the second half of that game, he hits Montana from behind and badly injures him. Montana is hit so hard he suffers a bruised sternum, bruised stomach, cracked ribs, and a broken hand. Montana misses all of the subsequent 1991 season and most of the 1992 season, and never again starts another game for the 49ers.
Didn't he do something to his arm too? Because I remember his arm wasn't quite right after that either. Because like he was like throwing the ball when that guy.
He
hit him.
was, yeah.
So it was like a really bad time to get hit.
It was, and it
Yeah.
was from behind. He never
Yeah.
saw it coming.
Yeah,
It
I think he
was-
did something to his elbow or something.
I mean, he never he didn't play again.
And he never was quite the same again. Like
No.
he was still had like a couple decent years in Kansas City
did.
and that after that, but
But I mean,
Yeah.
he went from being the league MVP, the best player in football,
to just kind of mediocre.
well, to not
yeah.
playing for 2 years.
Yeah, jeez.
Like it's a very significant moment in NFL history. It opens the door. That play, again, we're still in the original timeline. That play has ripple effects because it does open the door for Dallas to take over as the dominant NFL team, and it opens the door for, as you mentioned, Steve, for Steve Young to commence his Hall of Fame career. He was backing up Montana at the time. Now he is the starter, and it's his team after this. The Giants go on to win that game. They upset the 49ers, and then they go on to upset the Bills in the Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills. And the 49ers and Bills were, like, you could argue that those 1990, those 2 offenses were maybe 2 of the top 10 offenses in league history. And the guy that architected those victories was the defensive coordinator of the Giants, Bill Belichick. Belichick's game plan from Super Bowl 25 that year is actually in the Pro Football Hall of Fame on display, because that's how shocking it was that he was able to dismantle those 2 offenses.
On a personal note, I remember you always still complain about the lottery after this because that was when they would put the game on the little box, like while
Yeah.
they drew and that was the game-winning field goal, and the Giants.
Yes.
San Francisco, you had to watch it on.
I had to watch it in the
Yeah,
little
on the
corner of the
bottom.
screen because
Wow.
Pennsylvania. It was like Roger Craig fumbled, and then Matt Barr lined up for the field goal, and they're like, "Here we go for the right to the Super
And the
Bowl."
winning numbers today
Yeah.
are 5.
Yes, I had forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding me.
I just remember you always complaining about that.
Yeah, it was the worst timing. So impressed by this run, the Cleveland Browns hire Belichick as their head coach. And Belichick actually puts together a really talented staff in Cleveland. Guys like Ozzie Newsome, Scott Pioli, Nick Saban, Kirk Ferentz. He actually has a really good staff. They make it to the playoffs in '94, but then everything kind of falls apart when Modell moves the team in '95. Belichick, of course, later goes on to become the head coach of the New England Patriots and wins 6 Super Bowls. So that's the original timeline. Let's go with the timeline where Montana just kind of ducks out of the way and avoids the hit.
So we have like that little sound effect they make when things change.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
so-
little ripple
Yeah.
in the space-time continuum.
Or the one, yeah, it was like a little chime in like Back to the Future. Like, would I be looking at like a paper? Like, yeah.
Doo-doo-doo, yes.
49ers win. Yeah. Ooh.
So Montana avoids the hit. The 49ers win the NFC Championship game, and they win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Now, Cleveland, who in the original timeline was concerned about hiring Belichick, so people don't remember this. When Cleveland did hire Belichick, he was only in his 30s. He'd never been an NFL head coach. And nowadays, you see that a lot, right? Like Sean McVay and Sean McDermott. And you see, let's hire the young, smart coach. Back then, that was, not a thing at all. You never hired young coaches. And Cleveland took a lot of criticism. Modell took a lot of criticism when he made that hire, because what are you doing hiring that guy, even after Belichick had won those 2 big games? So with Belichick losing in the championship game, Cleveland decides to go with one of their other finalists. They go with Rams defensive coordinator Fritz Shurmur, who is much older and more experienced. And Belichick stays on Parcells' staff for the 91 season in New York. Well, now here's where it gets into Pittsburgh territory. Because after the 91 season, Chuck Noll retires from the Steelers. And what were the Steelers looking for to replace Chuck Noll? They had kind of 2 things they wanted to hit. One, they wanted a defensive coach. And 2, they wanted a young coach, because Steelers don't turn to coaches. They want guys to be there for years and years. Well, guess who fits that profile in 1991? It's Giants defensive coordinator Bill Belichick. So the Steelers hire Bill Belichick to be their head coach in 1992. Now, Belichick, unsatisfied with having Bubby Brister and Neil O'Donnell as his quarterbacks, he goes out and engineers a trade with San Francisco for disgruntled backup Steve Young.
Yeah, Tom Donahoe is going to go along with this.
Oh, he's going to go along with it. He's going along with it.
And so you're counting on Tom Donahoe going along with this, and Dan Rooney signing off on this.
Well, it wouldn't have had to be. It wouldn't have had to be that big of a trade, because Steve Young's a backup. Remember,
okay.
Montana never gets hurt.
So Montana never got hurt.
Never.
Okay.
So
I'm in.
So Steve Young's doesn't want to be there anymore. He's a backup. You probably maybe like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. You don't have to give up the world for him, because he hasn't done anything
Well,
yet.
Dan, you got to remember Dan's philosophy was you never mortgage the future for a trade, because what's his name, Bert Bell or not Bert, one of the goofy goofball coaches before Noel used to do that every year.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It would have had to have been a reasonable trade, but I think it would have been, because Steve Young was a failed starter in Tampa Bay, and he's a backup in San Francisco. So you remember, the Packers got Brett Favre, I think, for a 2nd or 3rd round pick, because he was a backup in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He hadn't done anything yet either. So I think you get him for not that much. So now Belichick has Steve Young as his starting quarterback for the Steelers. With Young in a great defense and unencumbered by franchise instability that he had in Cleveland, Belichick wins 3 Super Bowls in the 1990s. And when Young retires after the 1999 season, which also happened in the original timeline, Belichick drafts Michigan quarterback Tom Brady in the 2000
I got to root for
draft.
Tom Brady now? I don't know.
And the Steelers, under Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, win 6 more Super Bowls.
So I got to deal with Josh McDaniel and Bill Belichick stealing signals on the sidelines.
And the Steelers are accused as cheaters, and everybody in Pittsburgh defends them.
What a role reversal.
And in 2020, Belichick enters his 4th decade as Steelers head coach with 9 championships under his belt. Nice. All because Joe Montana moved out of the way.
He zigged when he should have zagged.
Tell
Much
me,
like Nick Harper.
Tell me it's impossible.
It's definitely interesting. I don't know if the Steelers would hire a guy like Belichick, because he's like such a he would sell his own mother for a win. I don't mean that he actually would, but I mean he'll do anything to win.
Yeah,
he'll actually stretch the rule book, and that doesn't seem like.
But
the Steelers don't seem to like.
You're going with what we know about Belichick now. In 1991, he's a defensive coordinator who's young, and you don't. I don't know that you know all that about him at this point.
Okay, well,
and he would have been a hot.
Because Jimmy Johnson was kind of the same way. Jimmy Johnson would do anything.
Right, but Jimmy Johnson had been the coach at Miami.
Had more success. Yeah.
Well, but you knew that about him. He was a college coach, and you knew that his reputation.
Although another thing that would have worked for Belichick, probably would have liked it here, is did you hear that interview with Tomlin about his interview with Dan Rooney? Dan came in a 2-door Buick and picked up Tomlin and his wife and Rooney and his wife, and they're all sitting in this literally just normal car, and they went out to eat, and they sat in the front seat and talked, and I guess So like, but I could see like Bill Belichick's that kind of guy though, that he would like that. I think Belichick would like that kind of
And
down to
Modell,
earth.
remember the guy that did hire Belichick was Modell. Modell was an old school owner like the Rooneys. He was not like
Modell, besides the move out of Cleveland, Modell was really like kind of a good owner.
That's
like,
what I'm saying. Like
they had a ton more success under Modell than they ever did. They just had a lot of bad breaks in the 80s.
Right.
I mean, just one of those breaks goes the other way, and the Browns have at least one Super Bowl win.
Modell wasn't Jerry Jones, so I think if Modell hired Belichick, I think Rooney would have too.
Okay. I can't. I could see I could see like both sides. Like I could see like a vote for him, a vote against him, and I'm not. Like I only know what I read by Dan Ray, and I don't. It's hard for me. Like normally, sometimes you can peg. Oh yeah, they're gonna like this guy, but like I don't know.
The other thing I thought about throwing in there, just because the one thing that I think messes up my scenario here is that Cowher was still there, and Cowher was a local guy. So I almost threw
they
there.
interviewed Wannstedt. Wannstedt was the local guy. And
Right.
that was the Wannstedt told that story just recently too about like America's team, and like they had Rooney like kind of shot him down. I was like, yeah, we were supposed to be American team, and the chief was like, no, we're the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And so I almost threw in there that Cleveland hired Cowher instead of Belichick
Oh, that would have been interesting
because he had played for Cleveland, he had coached for Cleveland,
He might have, yeah. Now that would,
and then that way
I could see that happening too.
and then that takes
because
Cowher,
because he liked Marty Schottenheimer so much in the '80s,
right, and then that takes Cowher off the board in '92, and then that makes it, I think, easier than to hire Belichick because
he's the next up and coming.
He's the next up,
yeah. That's an interesting one, yeah. Shifting gears to the college, and you know me, I always got to put a Pitt one in here, and this one is probably a little overly optimistic, but Pitt football never gets any optimism or love. So here you go. Here's your love letter to Pitt football. Johnny Majors changes Pitt into a national powerhouse. The original timeline is Johnny Majors, after winning the national championship, leaves his Pitt for his alma mater, Tennessee. He had a pretty successful career at Tennessee. He never won. I don't know if he ever won I don't think he won the SEC or a national championship, but he was always had like 8 or 9 wins. Pitt had some good years until Jackie Sherrill left and they fell apart and they went into mediocrity and things got really worse in the 90s. Pitt had to join the Big East late in the 80s and then the ACC because they kind of like had fell that mediocrity to bad. So, and now the real downer of all that is Pitt doesn't play any of its rivals in football that they played in the 70s and 80s because of not taking football seriously back in 82. Like that really caused a ripple effect to where now we don't play Penn State, West Virginia, Notre Dame, or Syracuse. Well, we still play Syracuse every year, but we don't, or West Virginia. We don't play those teams every year because we didn't take our football team seriously and couldn't form a conference. But we'll get into that later. So, cue the paper changing or whatever noise you want to. Maybe we need a sound effect for this. Yeah. Johnny Majors decides that like he loves Tennessee and everything, but he really likes Pitt, so he's going to stay at Pitt. Pitt continues winning at a high level, and because the university is making so much money off of football and the public absolutely loves Johnny Majors, there's nothing Wesley Potsvart can do. His hands are tied. So they hire a more friendly chancellor and athletic director to support Johnny Majors. They decide, okay, well, we got this guy. Everybody likes him. He seems like a decent person. Let's take our football seriously. In the early 80s, Pitt joins a conference with Penn State like Joe Paterno wanted to. And so now Joe Paterno and Johnny Majors probably would work well together more than Jackie Sherrill, because Jackie Sherrill, I think, annoyed Joe Paterno more than Johnny Majors did. So now, those two definitely could have formed a conference, and there's no way you couldn't tell me they couldn't have talked Syracuse, Boston College, Maryland, and Rutgers, and probably West Virginia into joining some sort of conference with them. So that's a big change. So now we have a nice little conference. Maybe it's all football focused, but Maryland's a good basketball school. So Pitt wins another national championship under Majors in the 80s because they're continuing to recruit and do well. Majors, instead of coming back to Pitt at 92, he has some heart problems and he decides after his health is waning, he retires, and he's given like an honorary position as athletic director. Pitt then, with Majors as athletic director and helping making the next hire, they decide to hire Mike Ditka, who just got canned by the Chicago Bears. So now they got this great coach, Mike Ditka, who's obviously going to be able to recruit. Whenever you need that recruit to come to Pitt, they can flash that Super Bowl ring, which I don't think Joe Paterno doesn't have any Super Bowl rings, does he? Huh, it's interesting. But anyway, it can't be a Pitt one without digging it. I guess your rivals there. Mike Ditka continues the winning tradition into the 90s. So the 90s are totally different. Pitt is now a much better powerhouse. With Majors and Paterno's allied, the two biggest football powers. Now Pitt's a strong football power. Penn State's a big football power. Northeast football isn't irrelevant like it's become. And we still have all the population centers, all the TVs, and everything that's focused here. It has a lot of clout and power. So this new conference goes, hey, Miami, instead of joining like a basketball conference, why don't you join ours? So they get Virginia Tech, I guess WVU. I have them coming in at this point in the 90s. They go and get Florida State, and Florida State the heck with the ACC. They said, I think Clemson doesn't like the ACC either. So they like football better than basketball. And because they're just they're able to talk Notre Dame into joining in maybe some sort of arrangement that Notre Dame always had with the old Big East. So maybe they're not a full-fledged member. The ACC folds. North Carolina Duke just decided to play basketball like they should. And Pitt still plays its rivalry and has because they've never really had a really bad losing season, they retain their fan base a lot better than they have. So, and they're kind of we're the Penguins. I say they're kind of where the Penguins are instead of where they are. But that one's probably over optimistic, and just my unveiled hate for the ACC is obviously on display there. But I don't know if all that would have come true, but I definitely think if they would have had Majors and Paterno at their colleges with enough clout and a friendly athletic director, they definitely could have pulled off at least getting West Virginia and probably Miami and maybe Virginia Tech. They could have got those schools to join them in a conference.
Yeah, even if the only end result of that would be playing in a conference with all of our
and
rivals.
Notre Dame definitely would have joined that conference over the ACC.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not as a full, but still playing 4 to 6 games, and then they could still play their USCs, their Michigans, because the Michigan rivalry, Notre Dame lost its Michigan rivalry, and that was a pretty, so like I said, it's just, the rise of the SEC is totally, not even the rise of the SEC and the ACC has totally killed so many, it's ruined college football for a lot of schools that aren't named, Alabama or Tennessee or Arkansas. That's just, it's bad for the fans.
Yeah.
Great for the university, I guess.
Yeah, and I never liked Joe Paterno, and I don't like Penn State, but I will say that his idea to start a conference in the early '80s.
He was right about that.
He was ahead of his time on that.
He saw the future.
He did.
And it's just Pitt didn't, and then Pitt joins a basketball conference.
Right.
And that screwed everything up.
Yeah. Well, I like that one, Steve. I like the Pitt.
Well, we did so many negative ones. We had to do an overly optimistic. We did an overly negative. The Steelers not winning any Super Bowl in the '70s probably overly negative. So we'll do an overly optimistic. We'll go the other way.
Mike Ditka and Bill Belichick winning championships in Pittsburgh.
What a different. And could you imagine then they would still build that shared facility, having Mike Ditka and Bill Belichick in the same building at the same time? Goodness gracious, two opposite personalities. Maybe still would have hired Rex Ryan back, although I don't think they're on speaking terms by that point.
Oh my, okay. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay, I'm gonna stick with football and go back to the Steelers here. This one's called Clark Haggans is more careful with his dumbbells. So here's what happened in the original timeline. So in the summer of 2004, going again back to the year 2004, Clark Haggans has.
It's almost like there's a juncture of the universe, a nexus of the. Or it could all just be a big coincidence.
Nice. So Clark Higgins is a linebacker for the Steelers, and in the summer 2004, life's pretty good for Clark Higgins. He has been designated as the new starting outside linebacker. The team actually has a lot of faith in Higgins, so much so that they've signed him to a new 4-year contract that March, and they had released Jason Gilden, who at the time was the team's all-time sack leader. So they've anointed Clark Higgins the starter, basically. So Higgins is working out in Georgia, and he's working out with an 85-pound dumbbell. And Steve, if you lift heavy dumbbells like I do all the time,
I'm down there pumping iron.
Yeah, right,
pumping
right,
iron.
Right. And if you ever when you put those things back into like the rack, because they're so heavy, like they have a tendency they can bounce. Like you have to set them down very gently, but it's hard to set them down gently because your arm's sore from lifting them.
Tired, yeah.
So Higgins is trying to put this 85-pound dumbbell back in the holster, and it kind of bounces up, and it catches 2 of his fingers in between the dumbbell and the end of it, smashes his fingers. Really painful injury, but not a really serious one. Higgins is going to miss time in training camp because he's got broken fingers, but he's actually fine. He's back in uniform before the regular season even starts. So there's really in the original timeline, there was very little impact to the 2004 season. In fact, I went back and looked at the news articles. The only scuttlebutt at the time was that maybe the injury would open the door for Alonzo Jackson, who was
he was horrible.
He was the 2003 second-round pick to steal the job away from Higgins. But yeah, that never happens because, as Steve said, Alonzo Jackson was not good at football.
I mean, he might be a fine person. I'm sure he's an upstanding individual.
Sure. Nothing against his personal character, but he just wasn't good at playing the game of football, even though he was a second-round draft pick. So, again, it's a footnote, but the impact that it does have is very significant because the Steelers need bodies in training camp at the linebacker position while Higgins recovers, and they bring in a guy named James Harrison. Harrison had been on and off their practice squad for the previous 2 years, and he had just been cut earlier that summer by the Baltimore Ravens. Harrison uses his time wisely. He actually surprises the coaches, and he plays well enough to make the team in 2004. He first catches the attention of fans after playing well in a game in Cleveland.
Was that the game where Joey Porter got kicked out before the game?
That was the game where Joey Porter got kicked out before the game because...
Yeah, he pulled off his shirt and because he always, when he talked trash, he would show his abs because that's meant to look how in shape I am. You should feel ashamed of yourself.
He and the Cleveland running back, I think his name was William Green, if I'm
I think that, they got in a fight before.
They got into a fight before the game, and they both get ejected before the kickoff, and Harrison has to start in this game in Cleveland, and he actually plays really well. And that's the first time people are like, oh, this James Harrison guy is actually pretty good. The next year, again in Cleveland, he again catches the attention of fans when he body slams an unruly Browns fan who has run onto the field.
That guy got banned for life from the
Did
Browns game, or at least a year, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, he
and then they realized they need, he's a Browns fan, and he's probably miserable and can't really fault him. So that's kind of like James Harrison's first two, hey, who's this guy? Well, eventually, Harrison becomes a starter in 2007, not replacing Higgins, but replacing actually Joey Porter, who the Steelers let go of because they have this guy Harrison who they think can take over. In 2008, Harrison's the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year, and more importantly, makes arguably the greatest play in Super Bowl history, intercepting Kurt Warner at the goal line and running it back 100 yards. And when he does retire from pro football in 2017, Harrison, not Jason Gilden anymore, is now the franchise's all-time sack leader and one of its greatest ever defensive players. And so people forget James Harrison's career may not happen if Clark Higgins, is more careful with the dumbbells. So let's go in an alternate timeline here, where Higgins is more careful with his dumbbells. Higgins carefully sets down the 85-pound dumbbell very gently. It doesn't bounce up. His fingers are fine. Steelers don't need any additional linebackers. Harrison starts working towards his trucker's license.
He's getting a CDL, huh?
That's actually what he was going to do. That was his plans.
Oh, wow.
Until the Steelers called him. So he actually does go into that, but mid-season, he gets a call from the Ravens, the other team he had been on the practice squad for. And in the original timeline, the Ravens actually did have some injuries at the linebacker spot that year. So the Ravens decided to sign him mid-season to replace some injured guys. And just like he did in Pittsburgh in the original timeline, Harrison plays well enough to be kept on the roster. The Ravens coaches are impressed. So now Harrison's on the Ravens, not the Steelers. Without Harrison there to stop the drunk Browns fan in 2005, disaster strikes for the Steelers as the fan stumbles into the back of Ben Roethlisberger's knee, knocking him out for the season. Without Ben there to tackle Nick Harper, as we talked about earlier, the Steelers lose to the Colts and do not win the Super Bowl in 2005.
So Ben's standing on the sideline because wasn't the defense was out there when the
Yeah.
So
Well,
Ben's just like randomly standing on the
Yes.
sideline, and this idiot like falls into him.
Yeah, because
Could
Harrison,
you imagine like how mad everybody would have been?
well,
yeah.
that could have happened because Harrison body slammed the guy. The security guards couldn't catch him.
But James Harrison's a Super Bowl hero.
Harrison body slammed him.
Yeah.
So now the Steelers.
Ben Roethlisberger's a Super Bowl hero. Yeah.
So now the Steelers don't win the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, Adalius Thomas leaves the Ravens after the 2006 season in free agency, which actually happened in the original timeline. And so now Harrison's there to take his place, just like when Porter was gone after 2006. Thomas is gone after 2006, and now he's the starter in Baltimore. And with Harrison on the Ravens instead of the Steelers for the 2008 championship game, it's Baltimore who advances to Super Bowl 43, where Harrison picks off Kurt Warner in the greatest play in Baltimore Ravens history, all because Clark Higgins took his time placing the dumbbell back on the rack.
Well, thank goodness he didn't. Yeah.
Thank goodness Clark Higgins was careless with his weights.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine that. Like some fan like injuring a player. That's all that would need to happen. Oh my. Going back to where are we going back to Pitt football here? Let's see. Oh, I lost my spot here. Okay, Morgantown. This one's time. Morgantown gets the last. Gets the last laugh. So all you WVU fans, you get to have one here. Pitt loses the WVU in 2007. It's the infamous original timeline. Pitt beats WVU 13-9. Rich Rod leaves for Michigan. Les Miles stays at LSU. LSU wins national championship. Tim Tebow wins his Heisman, gets to do commercials. Win saves Dave Wannstedt's job. He has 3 very successful seasons by Pitt football standards, at least. The alternate timeline. WVU hangs on to win. You know, maybe it's not impressive, but whatever. They somehow win. Rich Rod decides he's going to stay at WVU because Lord knows it's almost heaven. Les Miles decides to go to Michigan. WVU beats Ohio State for the national championship. I don't know. That's probably questionable. I mean, if the Pitt defense could figure out their offense, I mean, why couldn't Ohio State? I think I was with Tressel still too, right? Yeah. So WVU's national championship win legitimizes them, and they are invited into the ACC with Syracuse instead of Pitt. So now Pitt, WVU, because of that. So that really hurts. So Pitt's on the outside. Even though AD Steve Pearson has signed once at the contract extension before the WVU game, Peterson, as he is wont to do, changes his mind and lets Wannstedt go after 3 unsuccessful seasons. Pitt hires some mediocre coach and ends up the same situation they always are in. The Big East football and no interest from the Big 12, and Pitt they can't get in the Big 12. They aren't going to play like in Lubbock every other year. So knowing Pitt, that would definitely be a consideration because they might put up with Austin because that's liberal enough for them, but Lord knows Lubbock is too much guns and barbecue in Texas for Pitt. So bad enough they had to go to Morgantown. They're not going clear across the country, and they're definitely not going to Stillwater, Oklahoma, except for that one time when they had to. So they're definitely not going to Big 12. Penn State definitely doesn't want them in the Big 10 because that would be 2 Pennsylvania teams, and probably like the Big 10 really doesn't need a second Pennsylvania team either. So they're stuck in a non-Power 5 conference like the American Conference which is basically the old Conference USA, with all the USFs and all the
Cincinnati and
Yeah.
Connecticut. Yeah.
or worse, they could go to the MAC conference. They could be a MAC. It could be MACtion Thursday with Pitt football. Woohoo!
Then it
Pitt-
wouldn't be as bad when they lose to the MAC teams. 'Cause
Yeah.
They'd be in the
They'd be like, well, it's a
conference.
conference game, Steve. You gotta understand. When they lose to Toledo every year, or Western Kentucky, or no, who's a Western Michigan? I think is in that, or one of the directional Michigan schools in there. So things turned out really bad for Pitt there, not winning that game.
Yeah, when we did the episode on the 13-9 game, Steve, you talked about the massive ripple effect it had.
It really did. That is like that game really does have a big ripple effect.
And-
I don't know what Les Miles does in Michigan, but
Yeah.
West Virginia. Although they always like to spin it. Well, West Virginia didn't have the academics to get in the ACC. I think if West Virginia has just a little bit more success, the ACC doesn't care that much.
I agree.
I think more of the consideration was TVs and houses.
Right.
And Pitt brings slightly more TVs than West Virginia does because it's just U of Pittsburgh and not Morgantown. It's just more of a fan base.
But if they
which
would have been that national Richard,
they might have been
powerhouse,
the sexier pick.
that might have
yeah.
been the tiebreaker. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's another reason why the Big Ten won't take Pitt because like they already get the Pittsburgh market with Penn State.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, you're right. That could have been dire.
and
for
like I
Pitt.
said, Pitt is not going to the Big 12. Like West Virginia's desperate enough; they'll play in all these little podunk. Nothing against the Big 12, but they'll go to Norman, Oklahoma. They'll go to Austin, Texas. They'll go to Lubbock. They'll go to. Well, I guess Dallas isn't so bad.
Well, it doesn't make sense for them geographically, but they had no choice, and Pitt would have been in the same boat. And you're right, they would have, if the Big 12 would have even wanted them. You're right. I think they probably do end up in a MAC or.
Well, I could see the
whatever.
MAC because it's geographically makes more sense than
Right.
the American. I mean, well, maybe they could have went to the American, but UConn's in the American, so maybe they go with UConn. Basketball really would have stunk. I mean, although basketball maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not as critical as football to be in a big conference.
That's
so.
true. Wow. Well, I'm glad they won.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness that happened.
All right, I'm going to go with a baseball one, and I'm going to go with the Pirates keep Pat Mahomes. So in the original timeline, back in 2003, the Pirates signed a veteran pitcher named Pat Mahomes. He only made a handful of appearances that year. Doesn't really play very well on a bad Pirates team, so the Pirates let him go after the season. And Mahomes is only 33 years old at this time, so he's still, he's not really retirement age, but he never again pitches in the major leagues. About 10 years later, his son, Patrick Mahomes Jr., is drafted as a pitcher by the Detroit Tigers, but instead of following in his father's footsteps, Mahomes declines to sign with the Tigers and instead enrolls in Texas Tech to play football. 5 years later, the rest of that story. Mahomes leads the Kansas City Chiefs to their first Super Bowl title in 50 years, cementing his status as one of the best players in football today.
And driving me absolutely nuts because he breaks that like cardinal rule how many times he's the only quarterback, Mahomes, where like he'll run to the sideline and then throw to the middle of the field. Like I've seen Ben do it occasionally, and Ben kind of gets away with it most of the time. But like, tell me 90% of the time you see anybody else do that in the world, what happens? It's boom, interception, boom, interception.
Yeah. Mahomes is...
I don't know how he gets away with that. I don't know if it's because he can run still. Like, I wonder if as he gets older and he won't be able to run as much, if he's going to still be able to pull that off. Because, that's like his signature play right now. Like, that's the play you really can't stop. When he does that, the only thing you can do, you'd have to keep him in the pocket or make him step up. Because, when he gets outside like that, not to go, I don't know how you stop that with him. Especially his, Kelsey, too, who's a really good tight end.
I feel like he's approaching Michael Jordan-esque domination.
It's just unstoppable right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how you stop that play right now. And it's not like a scripted play either. It's not like, oh, okay, I can come up with something to the only thing I could say is if the Steelers end up playing them or another defensive team is you're gonna have to try and make him stay in the pocket. But he can still beat you from there too. He's pretty good out of the pocket too.
Well, here's a way to stop him. Let's go with an alternate timeline.
Nice.
So in the alternate timeline, the Pirates decide to bring back Mahomes Sr., and he plays well enough to be on the roster for several more seasons. So Mahomes Sr. sticks with the Pirates, And with him playing for the Pirates, the family settles in Pittsburgh instead of Texas. And Pirates pitching coach Ray Searage, who was a very well-known and very good pitching coach, starts working with teenage Patrick Mahomes to help him improve his pitching. So realizing that he's got a talent for baseball, after working with Ray Searage, Mahomes opts to sign with the Tigers.
And that guaranteed money, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Eventually making it to the majors a few years later. So he never goes to Texas Tech. He never plays football. And Kansas City never wins the Super Bowl.
You don't think, like, if he's a Pittsburgh guy playing it, like, he's definitely going to at least play football. Like, you know, I don't know where, let's say they lived in, I don't know, what's a ritzy neighbor.
Oh, he plays
Well,
high school. He plays high school football, but
I mean, so you're saying, let's say Pat Mahomes Jr. plays at, like, I don't know, pick your rich suburban neighborhood in
Pine Richland.
Pine Richland, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, and so he plays for Pine Richland, and he's obviously, you know, a talented athlete, so he's going to be pretty good, and he's probably going to take them to a state title, at least the game, if not
Sure.
an outright state title. So you're telling me he doesn't at least get a look from Pitt or Penn State?
Oh yeah, but
I mean, or West Virginia?
Sure.
I mean, I bet he ends up at one of those three schools.
So I never say he doesn't make it to, he doesn't get a scholarship offer, but
just because that guaranteed money and
and because he's worked with a professional. Again, Ray Searage is legendary for turning guys from good to great. Like he is, or mediocre to very good. And so my argument here is that because Searage works with him, he feels like he's good enough. It's not just guaranteed money. Like, I think part of his decision was, I probably have a better chance of being good at football than I do at baseball. Right? I think that's why in the original timeline, he went to Texas Tech. You know, because at that point you have to make a decision, right? And
what a swing and a miss by the other Texas schools.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Texas Tech. Well, and then they got...
I don't know who the quarterbacks were at, like, Baylor and Texas and Houston, but geez.
Right. And then they got Kyler Murray after that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so that's the argument, is that he decides now he can play baseball. Why put your body through what it takes to play football when you can have guaranteed money playing for the Tigers, and if you're confident enough to do it? So there you go. That's how you stop Pat Mahomes. Go back in time and make the Pirates keep his dad.
Here's another fun one. I'm going to do a Penguins one this time. The Pens pull off the three-peat. Yay! Now this is probably a little overly optimistic, but I think we're feeling optimistic again after some negative Pitt ones. After back-to-back Cup wins, the Pens have the best regular season ever. They win the President's Trophy. This is the original timeline. They have a 17-game winning streak, which I still remember. That was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was.
And they only lost on overtime or something I remember it was a really the other team was just desperate to beat them. And then second round of the playoffs, they lose the Islanders on a Game 7 shot in overtime by David Volek. Future Penguins, Darius Kasparaitis causes the Pens star Lemieux and Yager all kinds of difficulty throughout the series. The Pens lost, and the emergence of the trap defense ends their Cup runs and sets the franchise back for years to follow. So they don't win another Stanley Cup till 2009? Yes. So in the alternate timeline, the Pens score 3 times in the third period, and they just hold the lead. And they win the series in Game 7. The win kind of wakes them up. They're like, hey, we better play better. And they get ready for a tough series against some team from Montreal called the Canadiens. Now, I remember this team only because, when my kid was younger, they bring home these books to read to them to help them encourage reading. So Joel would always pick the sports books, and we picked one on the Canadiens. And this was in Joel just thinks the Canadiens are the greatest hockey. And he's probably right. Because if you read about that run in '93 was amazing. Patrick Waugh was really, really good. They played a lot of overtime and 1-goal games and won them all, mainly because of Patrick Waugh. Well, in my alternate series, they go 7 games. It's a tough series. You know, the Canadiens are really good. Waugh's a really good goalie. And even with the Penguins' firepower, it goes 7 games. And in Game 7, it always happens, seems in hockey, David Volek scoring the improbable goal. Rookie Martin Straka scores 2 improbable goals against Patrick Waugh, and the Pens move on to the LA Kings in the Stanley Cup final. So it's a dream matchup. The NHL loves it because it's going to be great for TV. It's Lemieux versus Gretzky. It's basically the hockey equivalent of Magic versus Bird from the 80s. It's East Coast, West Coast, big city, little city. It's just everything that like TV loves to hype. The Pens, Lemieux and Yarger, they actually smoke the Kings goalie Kelly Hrudey. They win the series 4-1. Gretzky only is able to win. The Pens complete the three-peat. It's the first three-peat since the 1980s Islanders, ironically, which is still, I think, the last time any team is three-peated, right? Yeah,
Correct.
as of right now. The Pens dynasty still comes to an end the next year in a rare playoff loss to the Washington Capitals. Between financial concerns, bad ownership, and the trap taking over the league, the Pens slide into mediocrity. But they still get that three-peat over, probably the most optimistic part is them beating the Canadiens. I think they could have beat the Kings in the final, but goaltending is always such a wild card in the NHL playoffs. And the Canadiens, the main reason the Canadiens won the Cup that year is because they had the best goaltender in hockey, and that was Patrick Waugh. So
I think, like you said, though, like if they get
that would have been
past-
such a dream matchup, though, for the NHL. Lemieux, Gretzky. Oh man,
That's why
Yeah.
why there's so many reasons why that David Volek goal is devastating, but that was one of the big ones because it would have been Lemieux versus Gretzky.
and it would have helped hockey. Like another case, like we were talking about the Immaculate Reception, like where that really would have hurt the NFL overall. That really did hurt the NHL
It
in
did.
reality.
It did because that would have,
Yeah.
like you said, that would have been Bird versus Magic, and that Canadians, like if they would have played the Canadiens, I think because they had, like you said, had such a tough series against the Islanders, it kind of would have shook them up, and said like they
It would have prepared them for.
yes for the
It-
defensive-minded.
At that time, the Penguins had never beaten a Canadian team in a hockey playoff until I think they've only beaten the Senators, and I don't think
Okay.
they've ever beaten the Maple Leafs or the Canadians. Yeah, still, still to this day, as of right now.
Wow.
So that was fun.
Yeah, I like that
They
one.
have another Stanley Cup on the. They have 6 Stanley Cups instead of 5,
Nice.
and I
nice.
guess the Canadians only have 23 instead of 24.
Haha.
Whoops. Yeah, be happy with
Take
your
that.
23 Stanley Cups.
Whatever. Like 18 of those when there was
There was like
6
6
teams.
teams,
Yeah, that doesn't even count.
Yeah.
All right, my last one is called "The Steelers Keep Al Bundy on the Roster." So this one, Ed O'Neill is signed as this is in the original timeline, is signed as an undrafted free agent linebacker by the Steelers in 1969. He's with them in training camp, but first-year coach Chuck Noll makes the decision to cut O'Neill. He even actually calls him into his office and says, "Hey, I can make a call to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think like they would have you'd have a shot to make the team there because they're kind of thin at that position." But O'Neill says, "You know what? I'm just done with football at this point. I don't want to go try out for another team." And he actually goes into acting, and ultimately goes on to star in the TV show Married with Children, playing the iconic Al Bundy character. That show is the first big hit for the fledgling Fox network and creates an identification for Fox as kind of like the edgy alternative to traditional broadcast
Do you know
television.
where Al Bundy or Ed O'Neill went to college?
No.
Youngstown State. Believe it
Did
or
he
not.
really?
Yes,
Oh,
he's a
wow.
Youngstown State alum. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So he's almost a local guy.
Yeah. That's pretty Western Pennsylvania. It's still kind of the same Western Pennsylvania.
Close enough.
Yeah,
Close enough.
yeah.
Well, and remember too, when that show came on, like
Well, I think Fox, like you said, like edgy, entertaining. Like back then, the family sitcom was like Growing Pains,
right.
or
Right.
what am I trying to think?
Who's
of?
the
Like,
boss
a
or
ser-
Cosby Show or
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
the father's always like he might have some jokes in there, but he was always seen as the wise and
Right. not the total slouch.
not a slaw. It was
Yeah.
it was definitely cast against type, is
It
I
was.
guess they would say.
Well, and that's really
Yeah.
that's really how Fox, like now Fox is a regular network, but like back then,
Well, who doesn't love the Masked Singer?
Well, but I mean, back then it was like ABC, NBC, CBS, and you had cable, but cable wasn't as big.
Yeah.
It was really the big three networks. And when Fox came onto the scene, it was like they had to kind of like, they couldn't just be another network. They had to carve out some kind of identity.
Well, you had TBS, the Superstation, and they started out of Atlanta, and I even remember WWOR out of New York.
Right, but those are all
Yeah.
cable stations. Like you had to
Yeah.
have cable, and not
Yeah.
everybody had cable back then.
Right. So I guess it was still
broadcast-
over air.
Yeah, when you talked about like original shows, like they didn't have original shows on cable back then. Like it was all broadcast television.
Right. It was I Love Lucy and the reruns.
Yeah, exactly. So that show really, I feel like, made them the, that set them apart. So let's go to an alternate timeline where O'Neill makes the team.
Yeah. There
And-
you go.
and he's
There's
part-
a little time changing. So.
Yep, and he's part of the Steelers' first 2 Super Bowl teams in the '70s. He's not really a star or anything, but he's he makes the team. He's on the team. He contributes, and because he has a fairly long and stable career in football, and makes some money doing that, he never pursues acting. So Married with Children is cast with a different actor playing the Al Bundy role, and because of that, never really takes off.
Well, they recast after the pilot. They recast the kids.
Did they?
I do believe,
Interesting.
or maybe it was Peg. No, it was Peg.
Okay.
Because what's her? I can't remember the actress.
Katie
Katie
Seagal,
Seagal.
yeah.
I do. They I think they had to they did recast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go with the alternate reality
Yeah.
where the Al Bundy's cast with somebody else, and
it just doesn't work.
Just
yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the Fox network tries more and more traditional programming, because if their edgy Married with Children didn't work, well, then we must need to go back to traditional programming. But it never really works, and the network eventually goes off the air altogether.
See, oh wow, okay. So you think the Simpsons are kind of like, because of the success of Married with Children,
Well,
they weren't afraid to go.
Married with Children was 3 years before The Simpsons, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd have to look that up for sure, but it was a few years before.
Well, even on they kind of weren't their own. Like, when were they on Tracy Ullman? Like, that was their first.
Yeah, but
They were just like a bit. It was like, it's almost like, say, what, I don't know what the current bits on Saturday Night Live are.
And nobody
but,
watched
yeah.
the Tracy Ullman show, so that wasn't going to save the Fox network. And so I'm going with whoever the executives were said, well, we tried like this edgy sitcom and it bombed. So shows like The Simpsons, they weren't even necessarily going to greenlight because that stuff doesn't work. So Fox just doesn't work as a fourth network. Shows like The Simpsons, X-Files, American Idol, Arrested Development, and 24 are never created. The careers of Jim Carrey, Conan O'Brien, Carrie Underwood, Seth MacFarlane are never launched. And in addition to all that, the Fox News Channel is never launched, depriving rising political star Donald Trump the opportunity to endear himself to conservatives, and Jeb Bush becomes the 45th president of the United States in 2016.
But Seth MacFarlane's an American hero. I can't even say that. Mike James.
All because Chuck Noll decided to take a chance on a young linebacker named Ed O'Neill.
Well, I mean, it's your timeline, and you can do it. You can do whatever you want with it. But I don't know if Rupert Murdoch would have gave up that easily. Number one.
Yep.
Number two, there was like Rush Limbaugh and all them did have a lot of success on AM radio, but he
Sure.
never had any on TV. That's true.
Sure.
So there was kind of like this right-wing media that was kind of in its infancy. But I will say this too: Jeb Bush doesn't beat Hillary. Hillary Clinton's our 45th president.
I don't know,
We're
man.
wrapping up. We're heading into our second term of Hillary Clinton.
I'm not going to get into the political side of this, but a lot of people do not like Hillary Clinton. I'm going with,
He's
going with
another
Jeb.
Mitt Romney. He's just gonna, people are gonna pick him over her.
well, I think, and going back to
I mean, not
Fox,
that I'm no political expert or anything, but that's just my 2 cents.
going back to Fox though, like if you didn't have success on broadcast television, then maybe you don't take the chance on cable news, right? So you kind of like
So no Sean Hannity or Bill
Well,
O'Reilly.
by the
or
time
whoever else was on that network.
by the
way
time
back
he's
when.
launching Fox News, the Fox broadcast network is really successful. That's '96. Like they have the NFL at that point. They're a big time network. That kind of is
Well,
what
when
set
did
them into the.
CNBC and MSNBC? They were, I guess they were.
They were around that same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm going with Fox. Fox does not do well without.
So
their
you're left with
flagship.
MSNBC maybe, or maybe nobody does it. You're just stuck with CNN, just
Maybe.
like it always was.
Yes.
and Anderson Cooper's the big show on every night.
All because of
Ed O'Neill playing football
and
instead
the
of.
and the funny thing is, people listening will either really like that scenario or really hate that scenario.
I still think Hillary Clinton wins over Jeb Bush. I just do. I really do.
I got to go with something crazy. So Jeb.
Well, if you're going out there, might as well throw it out
Yes,
there.
I'm going to take this all the way to its potentially logical conclusion.
And Jim Carrey, oh no.
Well,
Who else? Like, what about Kiefer Sutherland? I guess he doesn't have a political career
Right.
resurgence there.
yeah. Carrie Underwood never gets spotted for her talent. Like, there's a lot of people that have the Fox network. to
Kelly
thank
Clarkson, yeah.
for their careers. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, wrap us up.
All right, this is the last one, and this is having to go on a diet myself. Yes, it's no fun, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So this one's called John McSherry Goes on a Diet. So a good time had by all. In 1992, of years of good success, the Pirates get to Game 7 of the NLCS against the Braves. They hold a tenuous 2-0 lead going to the ninth inning, only 3 outs away from making the World Series for the first time since 1979. Unfortunately, early in the game, umpire John McSherry, who was behind the plate, who was in poor health, he leaves the game and is replaced by first place umpire Randy Marsh. McSherry had a larger strike zone than Marsh, and it changed the out time of the game. When Jose Lean, just to not rehash the ninth inning too much, but Jose Lean still makes his error and Sid Bream walks, but then Ron Gant flies out, and also Damon Berryhill walks. Cabrera gets his improbable hit. Sid slides in for the winning run. The Pirates totally fall apart and not even competitive for 20 years plus due to free agency and cheap ownership. Braves finally go on to win a World Series and have over 20 years of consistent success under Bobby Cox and a great pitching staff.
And the Berryhill at bat, we talked about this in this episode, but the Berryhill at bat especially was some really, really close pitches.
So yeah, and so now make your little whatever you want time change. Umpire John McSherry decides, maybe I'm not feeling too well. I should go to see the doctor. So he goes to the doctor, and to his benefit, he kind of goes like, and I like these kind of doctors sometimes. Just tell me what the truth is. The truth is what it is, and it don't hurt, So he kind of has like a come to Jesus moment with the doctor, and the doctor says, "Hey, buddy, you're gonna have a lot of health problems. You might want to lose some weight," and John McSherry kind of has like some personal introspection there and decides that he likes umpiring Major League Baseball rather than eating Big Macs. So, it's a tough call there. McDonald's, umpire Major League Baseball. I can tell you which way I would fall on that, but I think John McSherry would pick the baseball too. So the Pirates and Braves still meet in that Game 7 in Atlanta. Now John McSherry, having dieted this whole year, is like 50 pounds less. His blood pressure's way great. He's like, wow, he's in the best shape of his Major League umpiring career. And he doesn't feel ill. So we're in the alternate now. He's able to stay behind the plate for the entire game. So the Pirates in the ninth inning, leading 2-0 with Doug Drabick on the mound. I'm going to say Terry Pendleton still doubles, and I'm going to say Jose Lean still makes his error, and that puts David Justice on base. Stan Belinda comes in, and he gets Ron Gant to fly out. The score is 2-1. With McSherry behind the plate, the Damon Berryhill bat now goes totally different. As a result, two of the pitches called balls by fill-in umpire Randy Marsh are now called strikes by McSherry. The end result is Berryhill strikes out instead of walking to load the bases. So with 2 outs, Stan Belinda gets pinch hitter, just like happened in reality, Brian Hunter to pop out for the last out of the game. The Pirates win, yay! And so the Pirates win their first series since 1979. Unfortunately, they have to play the Toronto Blue Jays in the 92 World Series. The Blue Jays were really good, but we're going to stick with we're going to end on a happy note here. With Doug Drabick and Tim Wakefield, the Pirates have 2 pretty good pitchers. The Pirates defeat the heavily favored Blue Jays in 6 games. The Pirates win their 6th World Series, also their first since 1979. Stan Belinda is now a Pittsburgh sports legend. And he gets those tough 3 outs in a Game 7 with nobody out and a couple guys on base. and he pushes the Pirates to push the Pirates to the World Series. He opens his restaurant in a now empty storefront that would have been Bettis's restaurant since he fumbled. And Ben didn't make
So we're
it
in the
that.
same
We're
universe,
combining
okay.
the alternate timeline. So
Okay.
yeah. So now there's this empty storefront downtown, to the Steelers. They haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time. But so he opens his own restaurant on the north side, and he likes to call it bases loaded.
Nice.
Yeah, the pop-up French fries and the Berry Hill dessert are great, I hear, down there. Sid Bream retires after the season. He spends the rest of his life in anonymity in Butler. Hey, major league pension's pretty good. You can probably live pretty well up there in Zelienople, right? He had a good baseball career. Barry Bonds and Doug Drabek still leave via free agency. And the team still does struggle due to the economics of baseball. But fans are kind of able to take like that Miami Marlins kind of saw us. Hey, we had a winning run and we got a World Series out of it. And with the Penguins winning 2 Stanley Cups, or if we want to continue with alternate, now 3, if we combine all our alternative, now the standings have 3. And the Pirates add a 3rd championship to the early 90s, making it one of the most successful sports eras since the 1970s in Pittsburgh sports history.
All because John McSherry decided to
not eat a
get
Big
healthy.
Mac. Yeah. See, health matters, folks.
It does.
It
does.
Eat right and diet. Yeah. and maybe we can combine all. Bill Belichick gets hired, so it's just all roses for Pittsburgh sports. We have as many championships as New York now or LA.
Yep.
With
Yeah.
only
Let's. How about we have a universe with all the good ones, and then we'll have an alternate universe with all the bad ones.
Yeah.
I like it. Good way to end, Steve. Good way to end. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for humoring us and engaging us in this. This was fun just to consider some alternate realities here of what could have happened. Any last thoughts, Steve?
I still like the Berry Hill dessert and the pop-up French fries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess John McSherry couldn't have any, but
No.
But he could have a salad.
Yes.
He could come in and have a salad without the
They
French
could name a
fries.
salad after him.
Yeah, and it doesn't have French fries on it.
Right.
It has some sort of diet dressing on it. And
Well,
also, for poor umpire John McSherry, maybe he lives longer. He doesn't have that heart
Yeah.
attack before that game
Yeah.
in Cincinnati. So for umpire John McSherry, it really, it was a Moonlight Grant. It made all the difference in the world to him.
Yes. Yes, that would have been much better for him, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. Please check us out on our website at pittsburghsportsmemories.weebly.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Check us out anywhere where you get your podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. That helps other people find us. We'll see you next time.